There are memories that don't belong to you, yet they live in the hollow spaces between your ribs. Dreams of places you've never been, faces you've never seen, yet somehow recognized like ancient prayers whispered in a forgotten language. Tonight, we descend into the vault, where the soul keeps what it cannot bear to lose. You know this feeling, the inexplicable pull towards something unseen, as if invisible threads tug at the fabric of your being. It's the sensation of standing at the edge of a cliff you've never visited, yet your body remembers the fall, the ache for a home that exists nowhere on any map, but somewhere in the spaces between worlds where wounded souls gather to remember what they came here to heal. This isn't about past lives or mystical fantasies. This is about understanding that consciousness flows like an underground river, connecting all souls through hidden channels where pain and healing intermingle like roots beneath a vast forest. Your inexplicable longings, your deepest wounds, your strangest gifts, they may not all be yours alone. They may be the soul's attempt to complete what was left unfinished in the great tapestry of human experience. Maria found herself painting the same door repeatedly, weathered blue wood with brass hinges that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. She had never seen this door in waking life, yet her hands moved across the canvas as if guided by muscle memory that belonged to someone else. One evening during a meditation on the painting, she felt herself standing before that door, key in hand, knowing that behind it lay not a room, but a lifetime she'd never lived, yet somehow remembered. Through active imagination, a technique where the soul speaks through symbols and dreams, Maria began to dialogue with this door. She discovered it wasn't her memory at all, but what the depth psychologists call an autonomous fragment, a piece of the great human story living through her brush, seeking completion through her hands. There are children who seem to remember languages that died before their great-grandparents were born. Your nervous system carries whispers of experiences that predate your first breath, not because you lived them, but because they live in the invisible field where all human stories converge like tributaries flowing into an ancient sea. Your body holds ancient maps of safety and danger, patterns etched not just by your own experiences, but by the collective memory of every human who has ever faced the darkness and learned to breathe through it. Some of your fears may be inherited whispers. Some of your strengths may be gifts passed down through invisible lineages of resilience. David had never experienced water trauma, yet the sound of waves sent his nervous system into primal terror. During a breathwork session, he found himself not reliving a personal memory, but witnessing scenes of shipwrecks, floods, drowning, as if his soul was processing collective water traumas that belonged to the human experience itself. This phenomenon, which James Hillman called soul-making, suggests that individual healing sometimes requires us to carry and transform collective wounds. David's fear wasn't pathology. It was his soul's way of participating in humanity's ongoing relationship with the element that both creates and destroys life. Perhaps you've experienced the pull of places you've never been, the familiarity of strangers who feel like ancient family, or the weight of sorrows that seem too vast for one lifetime. Maybe you've woken from dreams that felt more real than waking life, carrying emotional residue from stories that aren't yours, yet somehow are. This isn't madness or spiritual fantasy. It's the soul's way of recognizing itself across the boundaries of individual existence, connecting you to the deeper currents of human experience that flow beneath the surface of ordinary consciousness. Consider the unexpressed longings that crystallize into patterns of reaching and grasping, emotional programs that drive us toward what we think will fill the emptiness. But what happens when these patterns originate from experiences we've never consciously lived? Stories that ended too soon in the vast library of human experience. Consider the woman who compulsively hoards books about ancient civilizations she's never studied, or the man who feels inexplicably guilty about abundance, despite never having harmed anyone. These patterns may represent what Carl Jung called unlived life, Not just personal potential that was never actualized, but collective human experiences seeking completion through individual consciousness. Sarah dreamed monthly of the same crumbling temple, marble columns overtaken by vines, altars where offerings once burned, now cold and forgotten. In the dream, she always carried a key that wouldn't fit any door and woke with the overwhelming sense that she had failed to restore something sacred. Through guided imagery work, Sarah began to understand that the temple represented not a place, but a state of consciousness, the sacred feminine wisdom that had been suppressed across cultures and centuries. Her recurring dream wasn't personal pathology, but her soul's response to collective spiritual wounding, her unconscious participation in the archetypal call to restore what Clarissa Pinkola Estes calls the wild woman, the instinctual nature that connects all beings to their essential vitality. Consider the threads that run beneath individual stories, the patterns of silencing, exile, and forgotten wisdom that weave through countless lives like underground rivers. Many carry wounds that seem too ancient for personal history, shame that belongs to the collective human experience of being severed from the sacred. Your body doesn't distinguish between wounds carried in your own flesh and those inherited through invisible lineages of pain. When you carry ancestral shadows, healing requires not just personal medicine, but rituals that address the deeper streams from which these patterns flow. Have you ever walked into a place and felt your bones remember what your mind had never learned? Or met someone and felt the immediate recognition that transcends explanation, as if your souls had been calling to each other across distances that cannot be measured? These moments suggest that knowing flows through channels deeper than thought, older than individual memory. There are invisible threads woven through the fabric of your being, pathways finer than light, older than memory. The ancients spoke of a great library written in starlight, where every soul's story breathes as living scripture. Perhaps your body carries tiny doorways, sacred passages, through which the soul remembers what the mind has never learned. There's an internal wisdom that prevents you from accessing more than you can integrate. Spiritual teacher Adyashanti describes this as the gatekeeping function of the unconscious, a protective mechanism that reveals deeper truths only when the psyche is prepared to hold them without fragmenting. This protection isn't resistance or spiritual bypassing. It's the same wisdom that prevents a flower from blooming in winter. Your soul knows the difference between curiosity and readiness, between intellectual seeking and genuine spiritual maturation. The memories that call to you will reveal themselves in perfect timing, not when you demand access, but when you've cultivated the inner ground to receive them with reverence rather than ego-driven fascination. Elena's 3-year-old daughter began speaking words that didn't belong to any language the family knew, yet carried the rhythmic cadence of prayer or incantation. When Elena recorded these utterances and played them for a linguistic anthropologist, she learned they resembled ancient Sumerian blessing rituals, languages that had been extinct for millennia. Rather than seeking logical explanations, Elena approached this phenomenon with what Rumi called bewildered knowing, the willingness to be present with mystery without needing to solve it. She created rituals around her daughter's spontaneous utterances, treating them as sacred communications rather than anomalies to be explained away. Over time, the child's mysterious languages evolved into an extraordinary gift for healing others through sound and vibration. If you feel called to explore these deeper layers of consciousness, approach with the reverence you would bring to any sacred space. Dr. Michael Newton's research on life between lives hypnosis revealed specific protocols for safely accessing transpersonal memories. Active imagination with boundaries. Set clear intentions before exploring. Create a sacred container through ritual. Light a candle. Call upon protective archetypes. Establish that you seek healing wisdom, not entertainment. Somatic awareness. Notice how your body responds to different images or memories that arise. The body's wisdom can distinguish between genuine spiritual content and ego projections. Integration practice. After any deep exploration, return to ordinary consciousness slowly. Journal without censoring. Move your body. Ground yourself in present moment sensory experience. Recent explorations in consciousness research suggest that deep meditative states can awaken parts of the brain that normally sleep, regions associated with mystical experience and access to knowing that transcends individual boundaries. There's a tiny gland, ancient as starlight, that produces the same sacred compounds found in plants used for spiritual journeying across cultures. This suggests that the capacity for accessing transpersonal consciousness isn't supernatural, but a natural function of human neurology that most cultures have systematically trained out of ordinary awareness. Your ancestors knew how to access these states through ritual, fasting, breathwork, and contemplative practices that modern life has largely abandoned. You may have noticed that some of your deepest wounds feel too large for one lifetime, too ancient for personal history. The grief that comes in waves without clear cause, the rage that seems connected to injustices you've never personally experienced, the love that feels older than your own heart. These may be signs that your soul is processing experiences that belong to the collective human story. This doesn't diminish your individual journey, it expands it. You're not just healing your personal trauma, you're participating in the healing of patterns that have been passed down through generations, cultures, and perhaps even species consciousness itself. Marcus had never studied ancient architecture, yet his sculptures emerged as if channeled from civilizations that existed before recorded history. When archaeologists discovered ruins matching his artistic visions, they realized his work wasn't imagination, but some form of cellular memory or field access to human cultural patterns. Rather than becoming inflated by this phenomenon, Marcus understood his role as what Joseph Campbell called a translator of mystery, someone through whom collective wisdom could flow into present moment form. His sculptures became healing spaces where others could reconnect with their own deeper cultural and spiritual roots. Chogyam Trungpa warned against spiritual materialism, the ego's tendency to collect spiritual experiences like possessions. Accessing Akashic memories or past life experiences can become another way the ego seeks to feel special, chosen, or spiritually advanced. True spiritual maturity recognizes that these experiences are not achievements, but responsibilities. If you're shown deeper layers of consciousness, it's not because you're more evolved, but because you're being called to serve the healing of patterns that affect all beings. The memories that surface through you are seeking completion, not validation. Tonight, before you sleep, create this simple ritual of remembrance. Sit in silence with a candle flame. Place your hand on your heart and ask, what memory wants to be witnessed through me? Don't seek dramatic visions or past life scenes. Simply listen to the subtle stirrings in your body, the emotions that arise without clear cause, the images that float through awareness like messages in bottles from distant shores. Write whatever emerges without judgment. These fragments, a color, a sound, a sensation of longing, may be your soul's way of processing experiences that transcend individual memory. Honor them not as entertainment, but as sacred communications from the deeper layers of consciousness that connect you to all life. Jung understood that individual healing is never purely individual. It impacts the collective field of human consciousness. When you heal a pattern of shame, abandonment, or spiritual exile in yourself, you're simultaneously healing that pattern in the morphic field that influences all beings. This is why your personal spiritual work matters beyond your individual well-being. Every time you choose consciousness over unconsciousness, presence over reactivity, love over fear, you're contributing to what Teilhard de Chardin called the noosphere, the evolving sphere of human consciousness that is itself awakening to its true nature. Rosa discovered through regression therapy that her lifelong depression wasn't personal, but connected to what she experienced as the grief of the wise women, the collective sorrow of healers who had been persecuted across centuries and cultures. Instead of trying to rid herself of this grief, she learned to carry it consciously, transforming it into fierce compassion for others who carried similar wounds. Her healing practice became a space where others could safely experience and release ancestral trauma. Rosa understood that some souls incarnate specifically to process collective wounds, not as victims, but as conscious participants in humanity's healing journey. Some individuals seem to download complex knowing, artistic gifts, or healing abilities as if connecting to rivers of wisdom that flow beneath ordinary awareness. This suggests that what we call genius or divine inspiration may be the capacity to drink from the well of shared human knowledge that exists in the spaces between individual minds. This suggests that what we call genius or divine inspiration may actually be the capacity to access collective human knowledge and wisdom through states of consciousness that transcend ordinary cognitive limitations. Your moments of inexplicable knowing, creative downloads, or spontaneous healing abilities may be glimpses of this broader field of shared consciousness. The call isn't to revisit the past, but to reintegrate the parts of yourself that you've exiled into otherworldly fantasies. The memories that surface, whether from this lifetime, previous lifetimes, or collective human experience, are all invitations to greater wholeness in this moment. Your soul isn't trying to escape present reality through mystical experiences. It's trying to bring all of its scattered aspects home to this body, this life, this opportunity for conscious embodiment. The Akashic memories, the past life visions, the ancestral dreams, they all point toward one truth. You are more vast than you've allowed yourself to remember, and that vastness wants to live through your ordinary human experience. The ultimate spiritual practice isn't accessing exotic states of consciousness, but integrating the wisdom those states reveal into how you love, work, create, and relate in everyday life. Every mystical experience is meaningless unless it increases your capacity for presence, compassion, and conscious response to the world as it is. When Akashic memories arise, receive them as gifts that want to serve your current incarnation. If you remember being a healer in another time, how does that memory serve your healing in this life? If you carry ancestral trauma, how can you transform it into wisdom that serves future generations? You may have begun this journey seeking answers about mysterious memories, past lives, or spiritual phenomena, but perhaps what you've discovered is simpler and more profound. You are part of a vast web of consciousness that transcends individual existence, and your healing contributes to the healing of all beings. The memories that call to you, whether ancient or future, personal or collective, are all expressions of the one consciousness that dreams through every form. Your individual awakening is simultaneously the awakening of the whole field of existence that has been seeking to know itself through countless expressions across time and space. The soul remembers not to escape this life, but to live it more fully. Every memory that surfaces through you, ancient or imagined, personal or collective, carries the same message. You are more than you've dared to become, and the world is waiting for that fullness to emerge through your ordinary, sacred, completely irreplaceable human existence. If this exploration has touched something ancient within you, something that recognizes itself in these whispered truths, I invite you to begin your own practice of soul listening. In the comments below, share, if you feel called, one dream or memory that has always felt mysteriously familiar, as if it belonged to a story larger than your own. You may discover sacred companions walking this same path of remembrance, souls who carry similar fragments of the great human story, seeking completion through our ordinary, irreplaceable lives.